We are what? We are who? We are what? Vibrant. We are who? 50 plus. Hi, welcome to Gray Lives on the Rise. I am your host, Professor Jamila Franklin, and we are coming to you from Oyende Enterprises, being sponsored by Jamila Sense, which is our product line of aromatherapy products that helps heal the mind, body, and soul. And we are bringing to you Alamaj's Rebirthing Program, as well as Jamila Sense, and a host of wonderful programs that will help heal your body, heal your soul, and heal your mind. 50 plus people, we are here to stay. Gray Lives on the Rise. We are what? We are who? We are vibrant, and we are here to stay. Join us for our wonderful episodes. Thank you, and continue to look for our episodes weekly, being brought to you again from Oyende Enterprises and Jamila Sense. See you soon. Yes, everyone. Welcome again to Gray Lives on the Rise. And I am your host, and I have on my shirt, and I have the lovely Atherton with me. She has on her shirt as well.
My shirt as well, yes.
Thank you again for joining us on this wonderful episode of Gray Lives on the Rise. And we have the wonderful Atherton with us this evening. And the title for our show this evening is How Life's Trials Created a New Purpose. Okay? So, introduce to you my wonderful guest this evening. And her name is Atherton Drenth. Atherton is a clairvoyant, medical, intuitive, and holistic energy practitioner, facilitating transformational healing for her clients. She has been extensively trained and certified as a medical, intuitive, and holistic energy practitioner. She is an educator in the healing arts, committed to helping others develop their full intuitive potential through yearly workshops. Atherton is also the creator of The Formula, an online workshop that teaches practitioners how to launch their practices and succeed as business owners and professionals. And that's something that's really important because we love doing the art, but sometimes we don't handle the business part, and that can be an issue. It can you cannot do well if you don't handle the business part. So she can help you with that. Atherton is a business entrepreneur who successfully owned and operated a healing center for over 10 years. She has had an international practice for over 20 years and has performed over 45,000 healing balances. She has been in private practice since 2000. Atherton Drenth is the author of The Intuitive Dance, Building, Protecting, and Clearing Your Energy, Following Body Wisdom, and the Art of Intuitive Journaling. She is also a contributing author to the Amazon best-selling book, 365 Moments of Grace. Atherton has been featured on numerous radio shows and is a regular contributing editor for the Paradigm Pages newsletter. Atherton also appears in the documentary Voyage to Betterment as one of 12 experts, along with other internationally renowned physicians, researchers, and pioneers in the fields of consciousness, research, and spirituality. She has a private practice in Ottawa, Canada. Okay. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to talk with Atherton. She's a lovely person. So Atherton, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my privilege, and it's an honor to be here. And I love what you're doing and how you're promoting for women who are over the age of 50, because it's long overdue. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. And also, she's a little modest, but I told her she's on our Gray Lives on the Rise Facebook page. She was getting the numbers. People like click, 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 like. I said, oh, go Atherton. She has her own little fan base. She has her own little fan base. She was getting the numbers, and I was so happy for her. So we're going to have a very good discussion. I choose deliberately not to send questions into people beforehand because I like for it to be organic and authentic. And I get the best interviews that way. So Atherton, you're a medical intuitive. Let's talk.
Okay. Well, it's certainly not what I started out to be. And as somebody had told me, 30 years ago that this is what I would be doing for a living, I would have laughed out loud, to be honest, because I was trained as a medical technologist. I was also an office manager. I was had various positions, and then I had became very ill, and I had a near-death experience. And
Oh, wow.
my life was saved by a young man who did cranial sacral work. And he wanted, or I should say, my healing process started by seeing a young man who did cranial sacral work. And he really wanted me to see a healer. And I'd never heard of that work. I mean, I was familiar with herbs because my mother had always used those when we were children. I knew about naturopaths. I wasn't really familiar with Reiki. I had no idea what therapeutic touch was. So, coming from a science background and having managed a doctor's office and working for hospitals and private labs, suddenly being told by somebody I didn't know to go and see a healer was way outside of my purview.
Yeah.
And I kept refusing to go, and he kept insisting, and I kept saying, no, I'm not going to go. And then I became so ill. I was bedbound. I couldn't get out of bed for 6 weeks. I couldn't even stand up or sit up for any length of time. And then one afternoon I died. And I woke up to find an angel standing beside my bed, and she said, it's your choice. She says, you can live or you can die. And at first I thought, oh, I'm just so tired. I'm tired of being sick. I had been struggling with my health for over 30 years. I had run the full gamut of doctors. I had had every test known to man, and I was getting you need to be on this drug, or you need to be on that drug, or, there's nothing wrong with you, or you're making it up. And I just got so tired. And I said, take me, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I started to rise up out of my body, and it was so blissful, and it was so you just can't describe that feeling of being in that essence with the presence of God and feeling that love and that bliss.
Yeah.
And I was about to transcend when all of a sudden I just kind of paused, and it's just like, I can't leave my husband to raise two young teenagers on his own. I mean, my husband traveled all the time. And I couldn't do it. And I just kind of froze, and I just said, can I change my mind? And it's like I heard this cosmic giggle. And the next thing I know, I wake up the next morning and I can sit up and I can walk. And then I suddenly realized that this healer that I was supposed to go and see, I had to go and see him. So
Wow.
I called him up, and I had an appointment later that week. And the funny thing is that I could sit up and I could walk again, but I couldn't drive. I didn't have the strength to drive. And so I had made arrangements with my neighbor to drive me down because it was a 4-hour drive from where we lived at the time, because my husband travels all the time. And she called me up the morning of the appointment, and she says, I can't, because she says, we've been up all night with the flu. And I thought, who gets the flu in July? And the whole family gets the flu in July. So my husband said, don't worry, I'll take you. And we were about to walk out the door when he got paged, so he had to go. So I thought, fine, I'm just going to take myself. And as I'm driving to get to the highway, I'm starting to collapse. And I finally said, God, you want me there that badly? I said, then you damn well better get me there, because I'm turning the car around, because I can't sit up for 4 hours. I'm struggling to sit up after 20 minutes. And the next thing I know, I am pulling into this driveway of this healing center. Never been there before. Yeah, never been there before in my life. I have no idea how I got there.
But you had an lapse in time. Next thing you knew, you were at home, and the next thing you knew, you were at the center.
I was at the center 4 hours away.
Gosh.
And
Yeah.
I how did I know how to get there? And this is a city that I don't know. And I've been driving down a major highway for 4 hours, and I don't remember anything. And when I get there, this young man, his name was Larry Steele. I walk into his healing center, and it was in one of these big, magnificent, old, century-old homes. And you walked in this large front door, and there were chairs in the hallway for the waiting room. And then when you turn to your left, the living room had been turned into a healing room, and the doors are open. These beautiful big sliding doors are open, and I can see him working on somebody lying on a massage table, and he's just basically waving his hands over. And he looked like he was all of 16. And I stood there and I went, oh, I cannot believe that I was meant to be here. And I thought, this is way over the top. I can't do this. I am not staying. And I went to turn around and I heard sit. And it's like, whoa, where did that come from? So I sat down, and I'm sitting down in the hallway, and I'm looking across, and I'm watching him work on somebody. And I'm just incredulous watching this young man do this hand wavy thing. And then you've got all these people sitting in another room, and it's packed, but the hallway's empty. It's just me sitting in these chairs. And then all of a sudden, the front door opens and 3 people come in. And it is a woman she looks to be in her early 80s, a man who's in his 50s, and they're carrying a woman who's in her 50s, and they're carrying her in because her leg is bandaged right from their hip down to her toe. And they sit her on the chair across from me, and they start to unwrap her leg. And her leg is pitch black. And I mean, I'm a medical technologist. I know I'm not a doctor and I'm not a nurse, but I'm looking at her leg and I know gangrene when I see it. And I looked at her and I said, shouldn't you be in a hospital? And she says, I've just been discharged. And I said, then what are you doing here? You need help. And she said, well, we're American. And she said, I've just been discharged. And she says, they want to amputate my leg. But for us, it means that my 80-year-old mother has to sell her house, and we have to sell our house. And it just means that we'll be destitute because we don't have the money. And I just went, good luck. Good luck. So then it was finally my turn to go and see him. And I get up on the table and I don't tell him anything. I don't tell him about my 30-year struggle with my health. All I do is tell him is that I suffer from migraines. That's it. That's all I want to, because I just can't believe I'm here. I don't want to talk to this guy. I don't want to be here. I just want to go home.
He looks like he's 16.
He looks like he's 16. I mean, how does this even work, And I lay down on the table and he touches me and my body just went, whoa. And I just knew that this kid knows exactly what's wrong with me. And he does his little hand wavy thing. And I sit up and the room just does a 360 and I'm just grabbed onto the side of the table. And I just said, what's wrong with me? And he says, you have celiac disease. And 2 days later, after another series of very odd synchronistic events, my doctors finally agreed to do a biopsy, and it comes back and it confirms celiac disease. And celiac, for those of your listeners who don't know, is in the form of, it's an autoimmune disorder, which means that your digestive system isn't able to absorb nutrients. So it's a gluten intolerance. And so you have to go on a very, very restricted special diet. And the doctor who performed the biopsy said that it was the worst case of undiagnosed celiac disease he'd ever seen in his 15 years of practice. And he said, how you're even alive, he says, is beyond me.
Wow.
So after I saw this young man, I stayed for 4 more sessions that day. And I just remember driving home sobbing. And I was so cold. And it was July the 29th, and it was like 80 degrees outside. And I have all the windows up and I have the heat on high. And I am shivering and I'm sobbing. And I just can't believe how I feel. And I get home, and my husband was home by this time. And I walked in and he looks at me and he goes, whoa, what happened to you? And I said, I think I've been healed. And he goes, what? I said, yeah, I know. He did this hand wavy thing. And I feel like so much better. And I can't believe it. And he goes, well, that's weird. And I said, no kidding. And he said, well, what now? And I said, well, I go back and I see him again. So what ends up happening is every other week I go back and I go down for 2 days and I have 5 sessions a day and I end up staying at a hotel. And every day I went and I would sit down in the hallway in my little chair, and the door would open up and these 3 people would come in. And over the next 3 months, I see this woman's leg go from black to green to blue to yellow to pink to her walking in. She's been perfectly healed.
What?
Yep, I'm not kidding. And I knew that that was God's way of saying to me, this works, and I need you to pay attention.
Yes, yes.
Because I just know I'm feeling better. I don't understand what he's doing. Larry is lovely. We're good friends. He's my teacher. He's my mentor, but Larry doesn't talk a lot, you know? And so there was no talking that was going during these sessions. And I'd ask him questions and he'd say, well, I just balanced you, or I fixed this, or I fixed that. And that was it. So then after about 3.5 months, he's just looking at me and he says, so what do you do for a living? And I said, well, I'm a manager. I write policy and procedure manuals for a crop insurance company. And he says, do you like your job? And I said, yeah, I love it. It's the best job I've ever had. And he said, you could do this, you know. And I said, what, are you nuts? And he goes, no, he says, you could do what I'm doing. And I said, no. He said, well, think about it. He says, I got a course starting in a couple of weeks and I'd really like it if you came. Whatever. So I go home and I tell my husband and he goes, what, is he nuts? And I said, yeah, I think he's crazy. I said, I'm not going. This is just ludicrous. You know, I'm happy. I've got a great job. I had a high paying position. I was a manager. I had a pension. I had benefits. Why would I leave? You know, as far as I was concerned, I was set for life. And then after a couple of weeks, I just thought, you know, I'm really curious to know what it is that he does, you know. So, you know, the medical intuitive in me, the scientist in me was just like, I got to know what this is. Mm-hmm. So I, on a whim, just signed up, and I went to the course, and it changed my life. I just remember the first day I walked into class, there were 20 people, and they were all serious healers. I mean, we're talking chiropractors, shamans, Reiki masters. I mean, these people, naturopaths, and these people had been doing this for years. And they're all doing the hand wavy thing. And I know nothing. I mean, I'm starting from point zero. And I end up going back to do his training, and it takes a year to train with him. And I'm crying through the courses, and I'm arguing with him through the courses, because by this time I'm writing policy and procedure manuals, and I don't like his training manual. So I'm rewriting his training manual while I'm fighting with him. And then people keep coming to me and saying, you know, can you come and work on me? Can you come and work on me? And it's like, hey, hold on just a minute. I am the one person in this classroom who knows the least amount. And why on earth are you asking me to work on you? Like, I don't understand this at all. But I would work on them and go, wow, this is really great. So I decided to play around with it, get certified. You know, I had to see so many people to get my certification. So I started, talking to the kids. And my daughter said, well, there's no way you're touching me, because this is just total weirdness. She says, you're not touching me. But I'd come home from work to find my living room filled with her friends who are eating me out of house and home and saying, oh, you know, Mrs. Drenth, can you work on me? Can you work on me? So I'd throw a table up on the dining room table and throw them up there, and I'd practice. And then it would be, well, can you see my mom? You know, can you see my aunt? Can you see my grandma? And it's like, yeah, okay. And then one day I had a woman come to me and she said, so when are you going to open up your practice? And I was like, excuse me? She says, it's about time for you to get your act together, decide how you want to do this, decide what you're going to charge, and you need to open up your practice. So I did. I walked away from a high-paying position and opened up my healing practice. So
that's why I was going to ask you, were you still working in the medical field while you were doing the holistic healing? So you were working in that field until this woman asked you.
Yeah. And then I just realized that, sorry, I get really emotional when my note starts to run.
No, this is fun. I love it. Yeah.
So yeah, I just realized that I needed to make a decision, and that I was being given an opportunity to do something of meaning for my life. And the backstory to that is that when I was 17, my parents separated, and they lived 4 hours apart. And I would spend every weekend driving down to see my father. And I can remember having conversations with somebody who was sitting in the back seat, even though I was in the car all by myself. And I can remember saying things like, well, how am I supposed to know what to do? And he says, you know, you'll know when the time comes. Well, how am I supposed to handle this? And then I would get an answer. And then, well, what about this? And I would get an answer. And unbeknownst to me, you know, when you're driving down a highway, and if you're driving at a consistent speed for a long period of time, it puts you into an alpha state.
Mm-hmm.
So doing this drive down this very straight highway, the 401 in Canada is notorious for being the most boring highway in all of Canada, was putting me into an alpha state so that I could hear whoever my guide was. And this particular guide had been with me since I was 2.5. And I used to call him the voice, my voice. And I knew his voice. I knew who he was. I always trusted him. He had given me visions. He had saved me from situations in the past. So I just knew without knowing that I was talking to whoever my guardian was. Mm-hmm. And part of my training with Larry in the steel technique was I had to take a channeling course because I needed to be able to develop this ability to channel. Mm-hmm. I took that course with a woman by the name of Lori Wilson, who also has an online school, which that's just amazing. And I remember day one, again, we're doing it in her home, and the room is filled with women who are naturopaths and Reiki masters and therapeutic touch practitioners. And then there's me, and I'm Little Miss Corporate, and it's just like, what am I doing here? And she taught me how to connect to my voice, to the voice. And I met him for the first time. And I was like, oh, there you are. I know who you are. And I know what you look like. And I know what you sound like. So I was able to develop this relationship with him. And he helped me in the beginning because I would be working on somebody and I'd be like, you know, I know the body is saying this, but this doesn't make any sense to me. And then he would show up and he'd say, okay, well, ask them about this and ask about that. And that's when I learned how to incorporate the channeling into my healing work. And then one day he came to me and he said, you are no longer supposed to work with me. You're to work with the Archangel Gabriel. And all of a sudden,
yes.
Yeah.
We're going to talk offline because some things that he has told me recently. He and Raphael and Michael and Oya from the African Orisha thing. Oh, we have to talk.
Okay.
We have to talk. Gabriel is no joke. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Gabriel comes in and then he starts to, he starts helping me to understand how to hear the body in a different way and how to listen, because sometimes, you know, what I can say to people now is the body speaks in very simplistic language, and sometimes it doesn't make sense. And it will either, you know, go through the front door, I call it, or go through the back door. So somebody may come to me and say, oh, you know, I have a sore knee, and I go to the knee and the body's silent. And because the knee's not the problem, it's something going on in their emotional life that we need to discuss before we can talk to the knee. So that's going in through the back door. Or sometimes the knee will say, yes, I'm really, you know, I'm sore, I really hurt. Okay, so let's go into the knee and find out why. Well, there's inflammation in the muscles or the tendons, so then we work with that. So he was teaching me all of this. And then one day he came to me and he said, now you work with Archangel Michael.
Yes.
So then Archangel Michael steps in. So now I've got Gabriel and I've got
Ariel.
And then Mother Mary starts showing up. So then this becomes my healing team, and they're always in the room with me. So I'm always working with them. And
are they still with you now?
Yes, always.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Michael is permanently with you.
Yes.
Yeah. And Gabriel is still with you? Is Gabriel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but Michael and Archangel Michael and Mother Mary are the two that speak the most.
What about Raphael? Because that's really his area, his purview in terms of healing. So
he's always in the room with me because I always call him in, but he very rarely talks. And I was always very confused about that in the beginning. You know, like if Raphael is the archangel of healers, why isn't he my primary?
Exactly.
You know, and I have asked them that question, and they said, no, you need to be working with Michael because that's where the alignment is energetically for me.
Wow.
So.
I love this. Come on. I love this.
Thank you.
Wow.
So I mean, it was easy for me to understand and accept all of this because I was very fortunate in the fact that my parents were both very psychic. And
Mm-hmm.
my father he'd had visions his whole life. So, and my mother grew up in an Irish family, a German Irish family, and her grandmother and great grandfather were also very psychic, and they were known for their ability to use the herbs and things like that. So if I went to my mother and talked to them about, the lights and the orbs in my room, she'd go, "Oh, those are your guardian angels. Tell them to go back to heaven so you can sleep." And then and through that simple conversation, I'm learning that I can control when they're there and when they're not.
Exactly,
Um,
you can.
and
Exactly.
and then I'm having visions throughout my life that are predicting the future that would come through. So it was easy for me to take that leap of faith, and understand all of that.
Mm.
Opening up my practice was dicey. I mean, my husband comes from a very strict Protestant faith, and he really really struggled in the beginning. He was always very supportive. He was never one to hold me back. Um, and we had a very strong and loving and unique relationship in the fact that he traveled all the time. So I was the one, sort of managing the, keeping the ship afloat kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went to him and I said I wanted to leave my corporate job to do this, he goes, "Well, can you just make me one promise that if you haven't built your practice in 3 months, will you please go back and get a real job?" So that was the deal. So I said to the angel, as I said, "Okay, if I'm supposed to do this, I've got 3 months, guys, make it happen." And in that time, my husband ends up changing jobs. I lose my job. I've got 2 kids going off to university and the car broke down. And
Wow.
and I just sat there and I said, "Well, it's on you guys. You better make it work. Otherwise, I've got a perfectly lovely job and they'll be happy to have me back. I'm going back." So it all fell into place.
Wow. I'm just this is my cup of tea. And offline, you and I can talk about my experiences because I work with Raphael and Gabriel on a regular. I have no time delay. It's like when I started doing it, saying, "Okay, Raphael," because it's just basically extensions of who you are anyway. You
Yeah.
know what? Your higher self. So, Raphael, because I used to have these real serious leg cramps, and what you can do is just put Himalayan sea salt in the bottom of white socks, and then we take it away because it's a magnesium deficiency. So
Yeah.
I added that, but then it wasn't working as well, and I said, "Okay, Raphael, do something," because my toes will curl up and whatever. That's in 5 minutes. If I have any pain, it goes. Gabriel, any technology, verbal communication, anything, I sit back and say, "Okay, Gabriel, I need you to handle this." My phone was doing something crazy. He told me once to turn off the phone because it was doing some crazy stuff. I went to the phone company and she did a great job, but she couldn't really correct some stuff. He corrected a lot of the stuff. And so now I'm working with Ariel and Chamia for financial stuff. And they come through. And then Oya, which is part of another system. She's part of the Yoruba African tradition that I know and I practice. I have my whole team and my ancestors. They're amazing.
Yeah.
We need to talk offline, but I want to talk serious because you and I can have a 5 hour discussion.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
When I was a child, I was clairvoyant. I used to see things, right? And I would see people and travel to different dimensions and stuff. I still travel to different dimensions every
Mhm.
night. But I used to see people. And I know once I was asleep and I was asking my mom, who was in another room, I said, "Who's in the room with you?" She said, "There's no one in there." I said, "Yes, there is someone in the room with you." Now I'm in the next room in the bedroom. She she came into the bed. I'm sound asleep, but I could see. I don't know. I don't remember that. But I saw my grandmother. When my grandmother, I was very close to her. And when she transitioned, she was in another state. We're in Memphis. I saw the angels come and lift her soul out of her body. I saw,
Wow.
I was 5. And I told my mom, I said, "I saw the angels, but they dismiss you when you're a child." But
Yeah.
I saw that. And I used to think everything that I could see, because I can see people when people are talking to me, I can see the truth of what they're saying or whatnot. And I'm clairvoyant and I'm clairaudient. So I can hear when people are having conversations about me.
Yeah.
No matter where they are, I can hear, I know all of it, right? So a friend of mine told me when I was in my 20s, she said, "How do you know what you know?" I said, I had no idea what she was talking about. she said, you know things that people don't know. I said, everyone knows this. She said, no, they don't. Because I didn't talk like there are dead people in the room.
Yeah.
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 Just people thought I was like a little old lady in a child's body. And it used to hurt my feelings because my mom was older when she had me. So, they just thought I talked older because my mom was older, right? But I was still a child. I acted like a child. I didn't act like an adult. But I just knew things. But it was just, to me, common sense stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just common sense. So now, even now, I know the language. I know what to put with what I see and what I feel, and I teach some of it. But it's just like I can see, yeah, the orbs. I can see energy around people, and so now I've started working more with Gabriel and Raphael. They're like that. Now I'm working some more with Ariel and Chaniel, but and with my ancestors are always right there. But this is so amazing. So getting to the medical intuitive part,
Yes.
Carolyn Meese.
Yes.
Okay, so you have the ability like Carolyn Meese.
I don't think I am. I think that Carolyn is got a very unique ability to see and understand the body, whereas I hear more the emotional story. I get the movies. So,
Oh,
so I have a different kind of medical intuition, because people will come to me and say, well, can you do a scan and diagnose me? And that's like, well, no, I can't. First of all, in Canada, it's illegal for me to diagnose.
right,
But
right,
what I do find is that I very quickly go to the heart of the emotional matter on
right,
why something has happened in the first place.
right.
So, because I do miss things, I mean, I've missed I can't tell you how many times I've missed cancer, which stresses me to no end.
Mm,
But also, that's a very hard thing to say to somebody. Oh, I think I see cancer in your body. So I think that there's um, sort of caveats for me on what can be said and what can't be said. But
right,
emotionally, people will say, well, how did you know? Why would that be coming up in my knee? I don't know, but let's track it. Let's find out what the story is. Because what I find is that, belief systems can form when you're very young and you don't have the emotional context. And we
yeah,
know that the body will take a belief system and it will lock it down, and it doesn't know the emotional story. It'll just like, nobody loves me.
exactly.
My baby sister's been born and I'm jealous and they don't love me anymore. So nobody loves me. And then
Mm,
what ends up happening is that belief system just gets wrapped up in more and more emotions, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
right,
And then the end result is they're 40 years old and, well, nobody loves me. Oh, well, how come I can never stay in a long-term relationship? And how come I don't, how come my marriages never work out? Well, it's because you have this core belief system that
right,
nobody loves you. So anybody who tries to love you, you end up pushing away. So if we go back and unravel all of that and pull out that core belief system that happened when you were 3.5 and your baby sister was born, well, then it's totally different.
right, right. That is so amazing. I do kind of similar work in this thing. I know you've heard of the emotion code.
Yep.
Bradley Nelson. I think he is amazing. But what Spirit has had me do is evolve it way beyond what he's doing. And so I'm dealing with core beliefs, but mine is more based in ancestral trauma. And that's been the gift that the universe has given me about getting to the core things. Because sometimes the things that you're experiencing are not even yours. They belong to your ancestors who were not healed before they crossed over.
Yeah.
And people
Yeah.
think the crossover they're healed, they're not. A lot of times, I tell them that's the reason why you have visitation sometimes, because they are desiring to be healed, and you're mistaking it like they're in here trying to spook you. No, they can't fully go over into the light because they're trapped, either because you're holding them here with your emotions and you won't let them go, or they need to have some things resolved.
Yeah.
So the emotion, you emotionally, I tell people you need to deal with your emotions, and there are people who don't want to deal with them. They like them more. I said, it's just energy, emotion, and I give them a good example with the person whom I love, and I've talked about her on another podcast. I think Tina Turner. Tina was a practicing Buddhist, and on to the outside world, it seemed like she had it all together. She transitioned after she had several strokes. She had cancer. She had high blood pressure. She had about 4 or 5 things wrong with her because emotionally that stuff was trapped inside her energy field. And I tell people, you better deal with that. You can chant until the dogs come home. But if that energy is locked in your energy field and you keep trying to talk and be intellectual about it, and you're not feeling it and not releasing it, it's going to show up as a physical illness. And I'm so glad that you're doing this.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, years ago, I had a gentleman come to me, and his chest was concave, and he said that he says, I'm suffering from a lot of heart pain. And he said, do you think I can help you? Can you help me? And I said, well, I don't know. I can't make any promises. Let's see what I can do. So he lies down on the table, and the very first thing I feel is like part of his heart is missing. And I said, did you lose your wife recently? And he said, yeah, 3 years ago, I lost my wife in a car accident. And he says, and I knew the minute it happened because I sat up in bed and I just felt like my heart had been pulled out of my chest. And I said, well, you sent a piece of your heart with your wife, and your wife is standing here and she's trying to give you your heart back.
Oh my goodness.
So we went through this process, I call it cord cutting, where his wife handed his heart, that piece of his emotional heart, back to him, and we reintegrated it into his heart. And he said, oh my God, I can finally breathe. And he came back a week later and his chest was in normal shape, like that concave, it disappeared. So that's one of the most dramatic cases I've ever had. But we forget that sometimes, and this can especially happen to adults who've lost a child, which is tragic. I mean, it's unimaginable. I mean, I've had my son almost die on me twice, so I can't even imagine the emotional pain of actually losing a baby. But for some women, they literally throw a piece of themselves into the grave with the child because they don't want the child to be alone. And then meanwhile, the child is stuck. The child is trying to transition, but the mother is trying to protect her. So, it's an emotional process, but, giving the child back their ability to actually transform it and get it back into heaven, and then having the mother bring it back. And they're still grieving, of course, they still miss the child, but at least they don't have a part of themselves, entangled with the child, because that child needs to transform. It needs to be able to transition back to heaven.
Oh my God. So in that kind of situation, you say the mother gives herself to the child energetically. What is that like? Is she giving her part of her soul to the child, or?
Yeah, there's a part of the emotional body that is so distraught and so worried about this child being isolated and alone that it's like a piece of them goes with the child, and you have to sort of bring it back,
and cut the cord, because that's like,
because they love that, and you don't cut the love cord. I mean, the love cord will always be there, and that child will be there to meet them when they pass over. But removing that fear cord, removing that emotional piece that's entangled and causing them so much grief, because they, the mothers can be suffering from chronic fatigue, or anxiety or depression, or they just can't seem to get over it. And people just keep saying, you need to get over it. You need to get over it, which I think is kind of cruel when you've lost a child, because grieving is a long-term process. But on the other hand, if you've sent a piece of yourself away, you can't get over it because you're always feeling this tug. So.
Wow, this is so interesting. I think I'm having you back for part 2. Part 2, maybe I'll call in for people. Okay. But I know of someone who's a dear friend, and her mom transitioned about 40 years ago. And she cries for her mother as if their mother transitioned yesterday. And I told her that's not normal. I said, beloved, your mom, because of her mother and her father would come to me. And I didn't know them when they were on this side, but they would come to me because I'm a medium. So they would come to me and they would tell me that her grieving isn't serving her nor them, because they can't move forward, because she's holding. And I keep telling people, you gotta let them go. Because you're holding them here to this third dimension, and they're trying to go on to the next dimension. And your grief, they don't understand grief because they're happy on the other side. So they don't understand you're grieving for them, but for 40 something years, this woman cries. And I said, and I told her, I said, that's a lot of guilt because it doesn't make sense. Because my mom transitioned, right? And I had done everything that I could for her. So I didn't grieve like that. My brother was grieving because he had done what he needed to have done, right? But for me, I was complete. I had said everything I needed to say to her. For the most part, she and I had some words and whatever. I would have, there's nothing I wouldn't have done for my mom. But I also owned the fact that I was grown and I was going to have an adult conversation with her as an adult that I couldn't have as a child. But when I see people grieving and falling all into caskets and just, you can't pull them up off the floor, I'm like, that's guilt. I don't, because I can't understand. I don't relate to that.
Well, some people have such a deep-seated fear of death that they don't understand what's happening to people who have died. And, you know, my mother had a near-death experience when she gave birth to my older sister. And, you know, she told me that it was the most beautiful experience that she ever had. And that she didn't want to come back. And they made her come back. And she was furious. And she said that she always felt like her body. She says, I feel like I'm stuck in a wetsuit that's 3 sizes too small. And my mother was on a perpetual diet for the rest of her life after that.
Wow.
But she told me, and they told her there are 5 things that are going to happen to her in her lifetime when she comes back. And when she finally told me about it when I was a young teenager, 3 of those 5 things had come true. And she never told me what the other 2 were. So I was never afraid of death. She says, don't ever be afraid of death. She says, it's beautiful. It's just so beautiful. And when I had my near-death experience, they're like, oh, that is really beautiful. And then when I'm helping people to transition, and I've helped a couple of people pass over, and I will walk them to the gate, you know, and it's like, oh, it's just, you know, I'd really, really like to be there. And it's like, oh, I have to come back. Oh, and it's so hard. And because it's so beautiful over there.
I know, and peaceful, and what I know, and I've not had an NDE, but I'm just not afraid. I'm not afraid of it. You know, I'm not afraid to cross because I go out there in the ethers, you know, most nights, and I'm traveling, and I'm, you know, people have all these misconceptions about stuff. I don't fear any of that, right? I don't fear because you know, in the African tradition that I'm part of, Oya is oracle, and she sits at the gate to help people cross over.
Yeah.
So people have all these fears about. That's what I love about the people in New Orleans. They sing, they make a parade out of it. You know, it's celebratory. It's not like, oh my God, you know, because people who've had NDE say, when you cross over, it's nothing here can compare.
Yeah, nothing can compare. The bliss is just unbelievable.
Yeah, the colors, the scents, it's just nothing here. And everyone says the same thing. A lot of them don't want to come back. They're like, I'm back. I'm back in this restricted vessel. Why am I back here?
Yeah.
Usually it's because they have children, though. People with children usually, and sometimes they're told to come back. They're like, it's not your time.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Well, we still have some time. So, wow. Offline, you and I need to talk.
Okay.
We need to talk. But this is so wonderful. And people in the audience that are listening, you should definitely get in touch with Atherton. And she does things online. Definitely call her because what she's doing and what she is gifted to do is just amazing and wonderful because this whole matrix has had people afraid of the other side. And all it is that you're going beyond the veil. All the stuff that you're experiencing now over here is not even real. When you grow up, you're going to see this stuff. I worried about that. I thought that. It's not even real. But but the third dimension has you caught up in all these illusions in terms of illnesses and a lot of other things. This stuff is really not real.
And that brings up a really important form, Jamila, is the fact that I think that the time of healers to come out of the closet is at hand.
Yes.
because we need more healers, like myself and my colleagues, we were all so busy, and we get together and say, where are these people, because we all have people in our practices who are very, very gifted, and they can do what we're doing, but they're just so afraid, or they don't know how to do it, or they're afraid of the consequences, or what will people say? Well, I mean, I have people in my life who think I'm certifiable. Well, that's fine. That's it's like whatever. You don't have to have cake and coffee with me. And then I have other people who really embrace what I do, which is a beautiful thing. But I also have relatives who won't even talk to me. They're polite, they're courteous, and I still go to family functions, but I'm expected to sit in the corner with my cake and my coffee and mind my own beeswax and not disturb their sense of peace. And sometimes the churches take offense to what we do because it's outside of their concepts.
Yeah.
But having been in private practice for 20 years, I know, especially when I opened up the healing center, I had a client come to me and she said, I finally admitted to my doctor that I was seeing you. And she says he was really angry. And he said that if I continue to see that woman, I love that expression, that woman, then I'm going to discharge you from my practice, which is illegal to do in Canada. Doctors can't just kick you out of their practice like that. And I said, well, just don't tell him. And she said, well, it's going to interfere. And I said, no, energy work does not interfere with anything else you're doing. It doesn't interfere with your medication. It doesn't and if you need to see a doctor, see a doctor. Use me as an adjunct. But I'm not a doctor. I don't prescribe and I don't diagnose. So if you need to see a doctor, you see a doctor. And if the doctor says you need to take these medications, then you take those medications, and then I'll see what I can do to help you on the other side. And then I found over time, every once in a while, the client would say, well, I told my doctor that I was seeing you. And the doctor said, oh, good. Well, if it works, let it, do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then every once in a rare while, the doctor would refer. What surprised me was, and surprises me to this day, is the number of oncologists who are starting to get into this. And they're saying to some of my cancer patients, okay, so you've got cancer. This is what we have to do. We're going to do chemo. We're going to do radiation. We're going to do surgery. And if you can find somebody who does Reiki, go get some Reiki done. And if you can meditate, you need to start meditating. And I understand if you see a naturopath, you can do this with your diet. So maybe you better go and see them, because we know that we can do this piece, but this is the part where you come into play. And it's like, yes, thank you. And then you get a lot of therapists and psychotherapists who have discovered the magic of EMDR, which is I can never remember, emotional motor, I think it's eye motor reflex. And EMDR is incredibly powerful work, especially for people who are suffering from PTS, soldiers coming back from the war in particular. So, the trend is changing. Like Duke University does a lot of work in and around energy work, and I think that there's a couple of other major hospitals down in the States that are starting to look at this. And I know that in Canada there are hospitals who have very quietly have Reiki masters on staff. If you're trained in therapeutic touch in Canada, then you can volunteer at any Canadian hospital. You just have to prove that you're a full-fledged member of the Therapeutic Touch Association. And I have done that a couple of times. So the trend is changing. Nobody really wants to come out and say, "Oh, this works," because we don't. We as a society are not ready to say, "Oh, this is better for you than medicine," because it's not. It's an adjunct. Doctors have their specialty and they're masters at what they're doing, because if you break a bone, you need that doctor to set it. If you're having trouble healing, well, then you work with an energy worker and just speed up what healing needs to happen. So do I think this is going to replace traditional medicine? Absolutely not. And it shouldn't, because they're masters of what they do and they know the physical body. We just know the energy body. And we are physical and we are energy, and sooner or later the two are going to have to work together. So
complement each other. I think that people should have a choice. You should be able to choose if you would like holistic medicine and tradition, and not traditional, because it's not tradition, Western medicine. You should be able to choose. Here in the States, it was reported that I think like in 2013, a lot of the naturopathic doctors in Florida were found dead. They were mysteriously found drowned, suicide or whatever. I mean, there were about 13 of them.
I remember reading about that.
You remember reading? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so people went undercover. And I know too that African American who are MDs, medical doctors, who almost lost their licenses here in Georgia because they were set up in terms of a pharmacist was giving some patients some meds, and I think the pharmacist was working with them. So they went after the medical doctors, and they had to serve time in federal prison.
Oh, wow.
What they're doing is using Gestapo kinds of tactics with people, and people are basically being somewhat undercover. You know who the natural practitioners are, but they're not out on front page like that because the American Medical Association would definitely try to come after you. And it's interesting because we do what they don't do, but they are so afraid that they're not going to make money off patients because people are not willingly taking drugs, pharmaceuticals like they used to. They may take one or two and then they come over to a naturopath or to a natural healer because they don't desire to have their bodies poisoned. And that's the interesting thing. But I'm so happy. Oh my goodness, this conversation was so interesting. Did we cover everything that you would like to have covered? And
I think so. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. But yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything. I think the one last thing that I would like to say before we close off is, I found that for me that once I started getting into healing work, I totally understood all the struggles I had gone through for 30 years because it taught me so much. I needed to become a medical technologist so that when I became a healer, I would understand how to read lab reports. I had a son who was born with a lot of health problems, and I needed to go through that with him so that I could understand the power of working with homeopathy and a naturopath. Because doctors basically said by the time he was 3 months old that he would never lead a normal life. And I refused to accept that. I refused to accept that diagnosis on a 3-month-old baby. And how we had to fight to give that child a normal life. And, he's a perfectly healthy 42-year-old father of 2. And he's the picture of health, and that's due to working with the naturopath and doing homeopathy. But going through that taught me how to really stand up for myself with doctors because, I was regularly kicked out of doctors' offices because I would argue with them about what they were saying about my son needed to be on all these medications. And I would say, no, he doesn't need to be on drugs. We need to figure out what the problem is. And for him, he had all of these, he was reacting to his vaccines. He had food allergies, So, it was, and so it taught me courage. And it taught me how to work my way through the medical system, but then it also gave me the tools that I needed so that when clients came to me, even with all of the personal problems that I've had, I would have been able to give some common sense advice, of what does it mean to grow up in an alcoholic home, and what do you do when your parents split up? And so I was grateful for all of that because I'd spent 30 years struggling with my illnesses, but also seeing a therapist and struggling with all of these challenges that I had. And then when I started really listening and accepting this mantle, this gift that I had been offered by the angels, it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. Now I understand. And I think that we forget that, especially for women in our age bracket, we've seen a lot of changes in society, and we've been agents of change without realizing it. As my mother used to say, she said, you're not a feminist, you're a human being. So you don't need to be a feminist. You need to be a human being. You have strength, play to your strengths. And if you don't know how to do something, figure it out, and I always loved that about her because she was definitely a woman ahead of her time, in that regard. So, if any of your listeners are going through a lot of challenges and they're going like, why me? Why me? And does this never end? It's just like, no, look what it's teaching you. Look at the courage and the strength and the moral fortitude that you're having to take a look at in order to move forward with your life, because there's something that you want, there's something that you need. And the universe is trying to help you get there if you'll listen.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the challenging part, because you know that the universe, God, Yahweh, Jehovah, whatever name you ascribe to that energy force, is 100% in your corner. And sometimes it feels so challenging. And it's because the more challenging it is the bigger the task that you have, and you incarnated and agreed to do it. And
Yeah.
that's what I remind myself. Because people on the outside would make judgments. Well, if she's all this, she should have this together. No, 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 no. Some of the people who had the greatest challenges, whereas other people seem like they're sailing through, they came in here to have those challenges, because by people looking at your life and seeing how you're handling those challenges, then it gives them the fortitude, and it gives them the confidence, and it gives them the wisdom to do it. And I know the contract I had when I came in here. I know exactly what it was, because I know.
Mm-hmm.
But then, even with the knowledge, it doesn't feel good sometimes, because people can be people, and they can do some interesting things to you, which are for you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so when you're really desiring to help them, and they can just do some things that are not kind. So you sit back and say, oh, okay. But then understanding that, and loving the energy of who they are. You may not like them, because a lot of people I don't like, but then you love the embodiment, who they are at the core. That's the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
This is so wonderful. Atherton, like I said, we could talk into midnight, but this
I'm sure
is
we could.
no, it's so interesting. It's so wow. You just put it all together. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Always happy to be of service.
Yeah. I am too. I am too, with Great Lives on the Rise. That's the reason why I desire for people to meet people like yourself and like me, because they don't feel so alone, because they've been in these families that told them that they were a little wacko.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see, no, you're not crazy. There are people like you in different parts of the world, in Canada, in Georgia, in Australia, in Belize, all over.
Yeah.
And we are perfectly sane.
Yeah.
We were ahead of our time. And
Yeah.
now Mother Gaia is saying it's time. It's time. So, beloved, thank you. I think we're at the time.
Okay.
So thank you so, so, so much.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
It was my honor and my pleasure. So everyone, thank you. We've had the wonderful opportunity to listen to the words of wisdom from Atherton Drenth. Atherton, we didn't give them your contact information.
Oh, okay. So my website is athertondrenth.ca. So that's athertondrenth.ca. My
Like Canada for Canada.
Yeah.
.ca.
Yeah, .ca. But you can also type in .com and it'll take you to my .ca site. I have both.
Okay.
And if you want to email me, it's atherton@golden.net.
Okay.
Okay.
And
And I'm on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel, so I have lots of videos on my YouTube channel that teach different things. And my website, I've got online courses, my books. You can hear other radio interviews if you want, and you can learn a little bit more about me on my website at athertondrenth.ca or .com.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. It's my pleasure.
So until next time, everyone, be safe, be well, be healthy, be holistic, and get in touch with Atherton and go to her website. If you have any questions, please visit her website, and visit, our website, Oyende Enterprises, and Great Lives on the Rise again. Here we go. Great Lives on the Rise. Okay. And visit our online store. Until next time. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Gray Lives on the Rise, being brought to you by Jamila Sense, which is the product line of Oyende Enterprises. Jamila Sense is a 100% natural aromatherapy line that heals the mind, body, and soul. This episode of Gray Lives on the Rise was intended to uplift you, to inspire you, and to motivate you. Please tell all of your friends, family members, and anyone you know who's 50 plus, who's living a vibrant life and interested in doing more and enjoying life even to its fullest. So thank you, and please subscribe, like, and comment on this video and all our videos. Thank you, and until next time, until our next podcast, namaste and be well.